Welcome to the Claire and Arash Show Daily World Brief. It is Friday, July 31st, 2026. We are bypassing the noise today to analyze a broad stack of source material, really trying to distill the civic stakes and the permanent human consequences of the day's events. We know your time is valuable, so we are tailoring this directly for you.
And we have a lot of ground to cover today.
We are starting immediately with an escalating crisis in the Sudanese city of El Obeid. The paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, are actively utilizing drones to bombard civilian infrastructure,
Which requires extreme skepticism regarding how these semi-autonomous weapons are being deployed.
We aren't just talking about stray munitions here. The sources explicitly detail targeted strikes on primary schools, power transformers, and water treatment grids.
We are looking at a highly deliberate strategy of robotized warfare. It's designed to make an entire city unlivable. A project manager for Plan International on the ground is reporting that children in El Obeid are now terrified to attend school.
Or even wait at the few remaining water pumps.
Because the psychological trauma of a sky that constantly hums with explosive drones is profound. The United Nations has actually warned that the siege of El Obeid bears the hallmarks of genocide that international observers previously documented during the fall of El Fasher.
The geography actually dictates the military desperation here, which explains why the RSF is resorting to these scorched earth drone tactics. El Obeid is a crucial trading hub situated directly on the only major route between the army-controlled capital of Khartoum and the RSF-controlled Darfur region.
Right, it's a massive bottleneck.
So how does that geography dictate this specific kind of desperation? The Sudanese army currently has about 13,000 soldiers stationed inside the city, and the RSF is sitting just 30 kilometers outside the city limits.
So they're entrenched. This physical choke point is precisely why the civilian population is being squeezed so ruthlessly. If the RSF cannot physically march 30 kilometers into the city because of those 13,000 entrenched troops.
They use cheap drones to destroy the water supply, hoping the civilian collapse forces a military retreat.
Yeah. And that concept of a geographic choke point being used to apply asymmetrical pressure, well, it actually brings us to a very different geopolitical theater.
Tehran.
Exactly. Tehran's current calculus regarding its tensions with the United States and its regional neighbors relies on the exact same logic. Based on recent strategic analysis, Iran is deliberately maintaining a state of limited, controlled conflict.
Wait, really? Because an outright ceasefire doesn't actually serve their strategic interests right now?
It doesn't. They want the tension high, but just below the boiling point.
But why would a nation under severe economic sanctions prefer military tension over peace? I mean, if you are facing massive internal inflation and economic isolation, wouldn't a ceasefire be the absolute fastest route to lifting those sanctions and stabilizing your economy?
Well, it seems logical until you look at the mechanics of leverage. By keeping tensions simmering just below the threshold of an all-out regional war, Iran maintains a grip on global shipping choke points.
Specifically through the Strait of Hormuz and via Houthi actions in the Red Sea.
Which essentially holds a gun to the head of global energy markets and shipping insurance rates. If they sign a ceasefire today, they lose that leverage instantly.
They just become another sanctioned country with a struggling economy.
Yeah, exactly. Furthermore, this external tension provides the Iranian government with a vital domestic shield. It allows them to mask soaring internal inflation, high unemployment, and intense public dissatisfaction under the guise of national defense.
A ceasefire would simply leave them economically isolated without any external threat to unify the public.
Or force international concessions, yeah.
That structural instability is playing out against a deeply concerning global baseline. The United Nations just published a new report on poverty and climate, and the data is stark. 1 in 10 people globally remain in extreme poverty.
And climate-related disasters have doubled since 2015.
Plus, there is a massive $4 trillion annual funding gap to reach sustainable development goals. We are seeing the visceral human impact of these converging pressures right now at the border between Morocco and the Spanish enclave of Ceuta.
The footage from that is it's staggering.
Thousands of migrants essentially slid down concrete embankments and dove into the sea, attempting to swim around border jetties to reach European soil. The immediate human cost was at least 18 drownings.
The political fallout from this localized humanitarian crisis is immediately stress-testing European unity, frankly. It demonstrates how quickly administrative agreements collapse under physical pressure.
Because the border infrastructure in Ceuta virtually collapsed, leading to a severe diplomatic spat, Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has explicitly threatened to suspend the open border Schengen agreement with Spain, arguing that uncontrolled migration poses a security threat to the rest of Europe.
Which is practically impossible to execute. I mean, the Schengen Agreement is the foundational treaty that allows passport-free movement across most of the European Union.
And Italy and Spain do not even share a land border, so there are no physical checkpoints to reinstate.
Right, there's nowhere to put the guards. But the rhetoric itself is a sledgehammer. It signals how rapidly physical climate and poverty pressures fracture the institutional trust that holds Europe together.
The physical climate pressure is paralyzing European infrastructure in a much more literal sense, which brings us to a nuclear plant in Hungary.
The Pax plant.
The Danube River has hit a 30-year low across several countries due to the prolonged heat wave. Hungary has been forced to completely shut down its only nuclear power plant, Pax. For context, this plant normally supplies roughly half of the country's electricity.
And they had to shut it down because the cooling suction nozzles literally can no longer reach the water level.
They are sucking air.
Yeah. Nuclear plants require an endless loop of cold water to condense the steam that turns the turbines and to keep the reactor core from overheating.
So when the river drops below the intake pipes, the entire system has to be taken offline.
And the economic strain during these climate events creates a fascinating paradox. Look at Germany, the EU's largest economy. They are currently suffering a severe industrial slump. Unemployment has topped 3 million people, which is the highest since April.
Factory orders are down across the board.
Yet, paradoxically, the sales of portable air conditioning units in Germany have more than doubled in the first half of 2026. The population is desperate for cooling.
So you have a scenario where soaring energy demands for residential cooling are spiking at the exact moment that water scarcity is crippling the continent's baseline power generation capabilities, like we see in Hungary. The grid is being pulled from both ends simultaneously.
It's a massive structural vulnerability.
For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarineratio.com.
Let's move to a major story out of the United States regarding governance, civil liberties, and technical incompetence. The Department of Justice recently released the Jeffrey Epstein files, and a botched execution resulted in the unredacted exposure of the names, faces, and contact information of sexual abuse survivors. The DOJ cited, quote, human or technical error.
But the forensic accountability here is severely lacking, and we now have proof of exactly how this failed. The Fraunhofer Institute in Germany conducted a deep audio analysis of the released files. Their researchers discovered highly inconsistent redaction practices.
Yeah, the details are awful. In some audio files, alleged informants had their phone numbers meticulously bleeped out, while the full names and direct contact information of abuse victims were left completely audible.
This is not a simple glitch.
No, it is a moral failure by the justice system. Protecting informants while exposing victims creates a massive chilling effect on any future witnesses who might consider coming forward in federal investigations.
The DOJ's Inspector General is currently auditing this failure.
Because if you know the DOJ cannot be trusted to operate basic audio scrubbing software, why would you ever risk your safety to testify?
To put that technical error in perspective, it is like attempting to redact a sensitive physical document using a yellow highlighter instead of a black marker, and then publishing it for the world to see. It is staggering incompetence.
Really is.
That erosion of public trust in justice and administrative systems is unfortunately a global phenomenon. In Peru, the Constitutional Court just overturned a 15-year money laundering sentence for former President Ollanta Humala.
A case tied directly to the massive Odebrecht corruption scandal that has plagued Latin America for years.
Meanwhile, in Portugal, the education minister is facing mass protests and calls for his resignation after a disastrous rollout of a digital school exam marking system.
Wow.
Tens of thousands of high school exams are affected by software errors.
We are talking about lost grades, missing pages.
And students who have no idea if their college applications will be valid because the digital infrastructure simply lost their work.
We are observing a global pattern here, where administrative and judicial systems are fundamentally failing to deliver basic competence. Whether it is the U.S. Department of Justice failing to operate redaction software,
or the Peruvian courts reversing major anti-corruption convictions,
or the Portuguese Education Ministry losing high school exams in the cloud, the end result is exactly the same: the rapid erosion of the civic contract. When citizens realize the institutions governing their lives cannot execute basic administrative tasks, public trust evaporates entirely.
Let's talk about the ownership of those civic and cultural institutions because a massive civil war is erupting within FIFA over who actually owns the legacy of global football. FIFA President Gianni Infantino is proposing to sell a $4.2 billion minority stake in a new commercial subsidiary to a private equity firm.
Specifically Thrive Capital, which is linked to Joshua Kushner.
And the backlash to this proposal is unprecedented in modern sports governance. UEFA, representing European football, and CONCACAF, representing North and Central America, are threatening a total boycott of future World Cups if this goes through.
Furthermore, Carlos Cordero, a senior advisor to Infantino, just resigned in protest. The core civic argument here is profound. Should a cultural institution, a sport built over generations by the public, be surrendered to private venture capital for immediate financial monetization?
UEFA argues the World Cup is a sporting legacy, a public good. It is not a private equity investment product designed to yield quarterly dividends for a venture capital firm.
Yeah, that tension is everywhere right now.
The mechanics of that cultural sell-off mirror a major corporate struggle happening in the consumer sector right now. Look at Ben Cohen, the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's. He's currently waging a bitter legal and public battle to buy his ice cream brand back from its $11 billion corporate parent, Magnum, which was recently spun off from Unilever.
And his core argument is that the corporate conglomerate is actively silencing the brand's trademark social activism, specifically their board-approved stances regarding Gaza.
Cohen is literally calling for a consumer boycott of Magnum's other brands to force them to sell Ben & Jerry's back to him. It is the corporate equivalent of selling your beloved indie band to a massive record label, taking the payout, and then being outraged when the label refuses to let you play anti-war protest songs on your arena tour.
Well, analyzing Cohen's endeavor through the lens of market mechanics, the success rate for consumer boycotts against massive conglomerates is historically very low. This is especially true in the current era of what analysts call the backlash against woke capitalism.
Woke capitalism is essentially the corporate practice of adopting progressive social stances to market products to younger demographics.
Right. However, conglomerates like Unilever are realizing that adopting these stances often alienates large segments of their global customer base and invites intense political scrutiny.
Both the FIFA boycott threat and the Ben & Jerry's buyback campaign highlight the modern tension between authentic civic values and corporate monetization.
In both cases, founders and traditional stakeholders are realizing a hard truth. Once you sell a cultural asset, whether it is the commercial rights to the World Cup or a socially active ice cream brand, maintaining independent, controversial values under corporate control is nearly impossible. The financial imperative almost always crushes the civic imperative.
Shifting to the technological frontier, the artificial intelligence arms race is accelerating in unexpected ways, and the barriers to entry are collapsing. China is rapidly closing the AI gap with the United States, and they are doing it largely through open-source models.
The Chinese startup Moonshot AI just unveiled a model called Kimi K3.
Benchmark tests show it matching high-end frontier models like Anthropic's Claude, but it operates on a fraction of the computing power and at a tenth of the cost. In response, Washington is threatening sanctions, accusing Chinese labs of intellectual property theft through a process called distilling.
To understand distilling, imagine a brilliant student writing a master thesis. Another student, instead of doing the years of foundational research, just takes that finished thesis and uses it as a study guide to pass the final exam.
So Chinese developers are essentially using the highly refined outputs of expensive U.S. models to train their own cheaper, faster models.
The European perspective on this AI rivalry is quite telling, actually. Philippe Cahen, a Nobel laureate in economics, points out that Europe is severely lagging behind both the U.S. and China.
This is primarily due to a lack of venture capital and highly fragmented financial markets across the EU.
Yeah, he has proposed creating a joint French-German DARPA, essentially a massive public defense research agency, to fund AI innovation, recognizing that private European markets cannot compete with American tech giants.
Meanwhile, the Chinese ambassador to the UK recently published an op-ed pleading for open international cooperation and shared governance. He argued that lowering the barriers to AI innovation through open-weight models is vastly preferable to fragmented nationalistic technology silos.
And open weights mean releasing the actual neural network parameters, the recipe and the ingredients of the AI, so anyone can download, modify, and build upon it locally, rather than accessing a locked black box through a corporate API.
We have a literal impending collision to illustrate the dangers of these unregulated frontiers. A drifting SpaceX rocket upper stage is projected to accidentally smash into the far side of the moon this coming Wednesday. It is traveling at 7 times the speed of sound and will carve out a 90-foot crater upon impact.
It is a stark reminder of how quickly human activity outpaces our ability to govern the spaces we occupy.
We see that same lack of oversight trickling down into strange global microeconomies here on Earth. Right now, there is a booming biopiracy trade in African queen ants. Smugglers are digging up the mesocephalote species in Kenya, packing them in tiny containers, and illegally vetting them to European hobbyists for roughly $230 a queen.
Simultaneously, on the cultural front, there is a massive charity shop market recycling retro video games. Old copies of FIFA or PlayStation 2 SingStar titles that lack the necessary plastic microphones to even function.
It is a bizarre reflection of how we consume, hoard, and discard. Author C.J. Lead touches on this exact dynamic in her recent horror novel, reflecting on humanity's destructive and extractive relationship with the natural world.
Looking at those final items, they represent two deeply flawed sides of human consumption. Extracting vital wildlife, like keystone ant species, for casual amusement in a glass box without regard for the local ecosystem perfectly mirrors how we continuously recycle disposable digital culture while ignoring physical constraints.
We pull life out of the earth for entertainment, and we fill the earth with plastic waste from outdated video games.
Exactly. And if we look at today's sources collectively, we are not seeing a unified global village moving in one direction. Instead, we are witnessing distinct, often opposing pressures, civic institutions struggling to maintain basic administrative competence in Portugal and the U.S.
Technological advancement vastly outpacing any regulatory framework in the AI sector and in orbit.
And harsh physical climate realities actively reshaping our energy grids in Hungary and our quarters in Spain.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to mull over today: the permanence of errors. The global news cycle moves incredibly fast. We consume updates, scroll past crises, and forget about them by the weekend. But the mistakes we discussed in this briefing are permanent.
They don't just wash away.
The unerasable exposure of Epstein victims' identities on the internet cannot be undone. A 90-foot SpaceX crater will permanently scar the lunar surface. There is no wind or rain on the moon to wash it away. An invasive ant species, once established, will permanently alter European ecosystems.
These are lasting monuments to our collective lack of foresight and oversight.
We operate at the speed of software, but our errors are carved in stone. For more daily world briefs, debate candy, and classic audiobooks, visit clarineratio.com. Thank you for listening.